In the spring 2025, the Trump administration heralded Operation Epic Fury as a historic triumph. The Pentagon reported the total destruction of the Iranian military machine. Presidential advisors promised the swift reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and Donald Trump himself took to social media to proclaim Tehran's complete defeat. However, just a few weeks later, it became clear that reality was sharply at odds with these public pronouncements. United States intelligence officials informed policymakers of something diametrically opposed to the official rhetoric from the podiums, and the Strait of Hormuz remained stubbornly closed. President Trump found himself caught in a trap that he had largely set for himself. According to American intelligence agency data leaked to the New York Times and the Washington Post, Iran has maintained operational access to 30 of its 33 missile complexes along the Strait of Hormuz. Only 3 sites remain entirely inaccessible. This indicates that Iranian coastal missile defenses in this critical region remain effectively functional, contradicting months of public assurances from the President and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that the enemy's forces were shattered and no longer a threat. Intelligence estimates suggest that Iran has retained roughly 70% of its mobile launchers nationwide and approximately 70% of its pre-war missile arsenal. Tehran has restored access to about 90% of its underground storage facilities and launch sites, which are currently deemed partially or fully functional. This arsenal includes ballistic missiles capable of striking targets throughout the region, as well as short-range cruise missiles designed for both land and sea targets. Sources familiar with the assessments indicate that the Iranians are successfully using mobile launchers within underground facilities to relocate missiles, and, in some instances, they are capable of launching directly from pads within these structures. When these intelligence findings reached the press, the White House's reaction was telling. Press Secretary Olivia Wales stated that anyone who thinks Iran has rebuilt its military is either delusional or a mouthpiece for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Trump wrote on social media that claiming the Iranian army remained resilient was virtually treasonous. Pentagon spokesperson Joel Valdez accused the New York Times of acting as a PR agent for the Iranian regime. The sheer aggression of these responses served as indirect confirmation of how painful the published data was for the administration. It has since come to light that during the planning of the operation, the Pentagon faced an acute shortage of bunker-buster munitions. Military planners were forced to make a difficult choice: preserve a portion of these stockpiles for operational plans involving potential conflicts in Asia, specifically with North Korea and China. Consequently, the strategy shifted from attempting to destroy Iranian missile sites and their contents to merely trying to seal the entrances of underground facilities. This tactical compromise yielded mixed results and ultimately evolved into a strategic crisis. President Trump now faces a grueling dilemma. The Strait of Hormuz, which handles approximately 20% of the world's oil trade, remains effectively blocked. It cannot be reopened at the flip of a switch. Any American vessel entering the strait risks facing a massive missile barrage from the Iranian coast, a risk intelligence officials have explicitly warned about. Restoring shipping, therefore, requires either a new military operation or a negotiated settlement with Tehran, both of which are politically fraught. The first option demands resources that the Pentagon is increasingly lacking, while the second would be a public admission that Iran was never truly broken. The military cost of the operation has proven significantly higher than anticipated. According to available data, the United States expended approximately 1,100 long-range stealth cruise missiles during the conflict, essentially the entire remaining inventory of that specific weapon type. More than 1,000 Tomahawk missiles were fired, which is roughly 10 times the volume the Pentagon procures in a single year. Furthermore, over 1,300 Patriot interceptor missiles were utilized, representing more than 2 years of production at 2025 levels. Stocks of ATACMS and precision strike missiles have also been substantially depleted. Replenishing these stockpiles will take years, Lockheed Martin currently produces about 650 Patriot missiles annually and has announced plans to increase production to 2,000 units. However, industrial capacities for manufacturing rocket motors cannot be expanded as rapidly as the situation demands. In private conversations, American officials have been reassuring concerned European allies that stockpiles have not dropped to dangerously low levels. But the very existence of these discussions suggests that allies are skeptical. This is particularly true, given that Europe has purchased billions of dollars worth of ammunition from the United States for Ukraine, and now fears these deliveries may be delayed as the American military prioritizes its own reserves. The war with Iran has suddenly transformed from a Middle Eastern conflict into a stress test for the entirety of American military logistics. The Pentagon is beginning to feel the limits of its capabilities for the first time in recent memory, occurring at a moment when the global environment demands a military presence on multiple fronts. Against this backdrop, Tehran is not behaving like a defeated power. Iran has relayed 5 conditions to the United States through intermediaries for a potential conflict resolution. Essentially, this constitutes an Iranian ultimatum. Tehran demands a total cessation of American and Israeli strikes during negotiations, a commitment to forego new sanctions, and the gradual lifting of existing restrictions, primarily in the banking and oil sectors. The third condition involves unfreezing Iranian assets abroad and restoring access to the international financial system. The fourth is the official recognition of Iran's right to a peaceful nuclear program, including uranium enrichment under international agreements. The fifth and perhaps most significant condition is a legal guarantee that the United States will not unilaterally withdraw from a new agreement, as occurred in 2018 when Washington exited the nuclear deal. This list of demands comes from a country that believes time is no longer working against it. Tehran appears to be betting that domestic political pressure in the United States, driven by rising oil prices, the risk of failure in the midterm congressional elections, and the exhaustion of ammunition, will force Washington to seek an exit from the crisis on terms far removed from its initial victory narratives. While Washington and Tehran negotiate through intermediaries, the global economy is looking toward another narrow maritime corridor with mounting anxiety: the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. This is the second strategic choke point, capable of turning a regional conflict into a global economic shock. After Iran blocked oil traffic through Hormuz, Saudi Arabia was forced to rapidly reroute a significant portion of its oil production, roughly 5 million barrels per day, through the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea coast. This increased the volume of oil transported through Bab el-Mandeb by more than 21%. While this maneuver allowed Riyadh to temporarily offset market deficits, it made Bab el-Mandeb even more critical and more vulnerable. Industry experts believe even temporary disruptions to transit through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden could trigger a sharp spike in energy prices. A simultaneous blockade of both Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb is what energy analysts call the sum of all fears. The planet would be effectively severed from 2 vital oil arteries, and a chain reaction in financial markets could develop faster than stabilization mechanisms could react. This specific scenario is what worries Western naval forces operating in the Red Sea under the escort operation UNAV-4 Aspides. The task force includes Italian Frem-class multi-purpose frigates, a Greek Hydra-class frigate, German Saxon-class air defense frigates, French multi-purpose frigates, and vessels from the Netherlands and Belgium. The operations mandate allows for the escort of merchant ships and the repulsion of missile and drone attacks, but strictly prohibits strikes on land targets in Yemen, a restriction that significantly limits the ability to respond to escalation. While command representatives speak of the highest level of situational awareness and readiness for operational adjustments, these official statements mask a deep-seated anxiety. In private, European military officials do not hide the fact that they are preparing for the worst-case scenario, even if they refuse to acknowledge it publicly. The primary concern remains the Ansar Allah movement, The Yemeni Houthis, who are traditionally considered the most independent branch of the Iranian-led axis of resistance. Missile strikes that their military wing, led by Yahya Saree, continues to launch against Israeli territory demonstrate the movement's enduring combat capability and its coordination with Tehran. According to sources in European capitals cited by Bloomberg, Tehran is explicitly pushing the Houthis to prepare for a resumption of hostilities against merchant shipping in the Red Sea in the event of further escalation in the Persian Gulf. For now, Yahya Saree's forces appear to be refraining from a total blockade of the strait or direct attacks on merchant vessels. This state of vague anticipation could change at any moment. US CENTCOM has preferred to withhold comment on the preparation of the 50th Destroyer Squadron for a potential escalation, which is telling in its own right. Following the effective failure of Operation Prosperity Guardian, the United States is acting with significantly more caution in the region. The Pentagon clearly wishes to avoid opening a second front, while a substantial portion of American resources is already committed to epic fury. This is where the most alarming element of the situation lies. The more Iran's position weakens in the current confrontation, the less predictable the Houthis' actions may become. Ansar Allah is not merely an instrument of Iranian policy. It is an independent force with its own logic, interests, and internal allies, forged by a decade of war. If a weakened Tehran loses its leverage over Sana'a, the Houthis may begin acting according to their own script, one that will not necessarily align with Iran's goals, let alone those of the United States and its allies. This represents the opening of a second front that the Pentagon fears, but may no longer have the power to prevent. The Middle East is steadily transforming into a massive web of interconnected crises that feed and amplify one another. The United States has encountered unexpectedly high military resilience from Iran and is now forced to rethink both its public victory narratives and its actual strategic capabilities. The American military machine, long considered to possess nearly limitless resources, is beginning to feel its boundaries for the first time in generations. Key ammunition stocks are depleted, production capacity cannot keep pace with consumption, and allies are deeply unsettled. The global economy has become a hostage to a few narrow maritime corridors. Names like Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb are increasingly cited by energy analysts as potential triggers for the next wave of global instability. Any new escalation would strike at oil, trade, and global logistics, with an impact potentially far more severe than anything experienced thus far. The world is edging closer to a tipping point where a local war risks igniting a global chain reaction. Perhaps most disturbing is the reality that none of the players, neither Washington nor Tehran nor Sana'a, possesses total control over the unfolding events. The established system of global security is beginning to fail, and there may not be another warning.